Jesus reveals how to escape the fear that traps your soul. Have you ever felt like you're trapped inside yourself? As if something invisible pulls you back, even when everything in you wants to move forward? It's a subtle but immense fear that settles in your soul and prevents you from living freely. Sometimes it comes disguised as prudence. Other times it appears as insecurity, silence, indecision. And the scariest thing? Most people don't know that they are living in prison. They call it normal life, but inside they are exhausted, paralyzed, lost on a silent battlefield where the enemy is not visible, but is real. And today, Jesus reveals to you how to escape this prison. You didn't get here by chance. There is something bigger happening now, something spiritual. Maybe no one will see it, but inside you there is a voice screaming for help. And that voice was heard. This message is not common. It's not just another faith video. She is a divine summons to your soul. There is a secret hidden in the midst of this fear you feel, and today it will be revealed. But prepare yourself, because what you will discover is not what the world taught you. This truth has been ignored by many, but not anymore. Imagine yourself in a dark room where all you see are shadows of your own doubts. What would you do if I told you there was a way out, but it wasn't where you were looking for? Jesus reveals to you today a path that breaks invisible chains, unlocks your faith, and transforms fear into peace. But before showing you the way out, we need to talk about the pain that brought you here. The pain you hide, that no one understands. The pain of those who try to be strong, but are tired. From those who believe in God, but cannot free themselves from the fear of failing, losing, or being forgotten. This inner prison is not a lack of faith. It's the enemy's strategy to keep you immobile. And as you blame yourself, the fear grows. But Jesus sees beyond that. He knows every tear you hide, every night when sleep doesn't come, every thought that says, I won't make it. And that's exactly why he brought you here today. Because the truth that will be told now can transform everything, and not just for a moment, but in such a profound way that you will look back and realize, my liberation began there. So take a deep breath, open your heart, silence the surrounding noise. Because Jesus reveals to you today a spiritual mystery that will confront everything that holds you hostage. And if you stay until the end, you will understand why fear lost control over your soul. Are you ready? So stay with me, because now everything starts to change. Now that you've taken the first step and stayed this far, take a deep breath once again, because this isn't just any moment. You are being spiritually led to something much greater. You are not here by chance. Jesus brought you for a reason, and perhaps that reason is precisely what you have been silently asking for days, months, or even years. There is an urgency to what is to come. A revelation has been released from the heavens and is about to reach your soul directly as perhaps never before. But for that, your heart needs to be completely open, not just curious, but available. Because Jesus reveals something to you today that can radically change the way you face the fear that has been holding you back inside. Before continuing, I want to make you an invitation that goes beyond the screen. If this message has already started to touch something inside you, declare your faith in the comments with something simple but powerful. I trust in Jesus. Yes, write that down. It may seem small, but this sentence written with faith could be the sign someone needs to read so they don't give up today. Your comment could be the answer to someone else's prayer. It could be the hug that someone has been waiting for without knowing it. And if this message is already touching your heart, press the like button now. Not just as support, but as an act of evangelization. Every like pushes that word to more broken hearts, more tired souls. You become an active part of it. And if you haven't signed up yet, this is the time to be part of something bigger. This channel is a spiritual refuge where Jesus reveals truths that heal, free, and restore. Activate the bell, stay close, because what you are about to hear was prepared directly for you. Get ready, because God can speak directly to you today. Don't leave this video before hearing what Jesus revealed about this inner prison that prevents you from living fully. What comes next could transform not just your now, but your entire destiny. Let's move on. The first testimony of liberation begins now, and you will see yourself inside it. It was night, but there was no peace. The wind blew as if it sensed the terror that gripped the hearts of the people. Behind them, the deafening roar of Egyptian war chariots approached violently. Ahead, an impassable, dark, and threatening sea. In the middle, Moses, with wide eyes, trying to hide his own fear while listening to the desperate cries of the people. "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? To die here?" Each word was like an arrow, piercing the chest. It was as if the entire future was swallowed up by now, and now was just fear. The people of Israel were free, but they were not yet free on the inside. They had left slavery, but slavery had not left them. Fear had a voice, and she screamed louder than faith. Have you ever been to this place? A moment in your life where everything around you screams, "It won't work! You will fail!" It's too late. Moses was there too. A man called to liberate, now paralyzed, staring at a closed sea and a merciless enemy approaching. But it is at that moment, precisely when the legs tremble and the mind begins to run in circles of despair, that God speaks. And he doesn't say, "Run," nor does it say, "Fight." He says, "Fear not, stand still, and see the deliverance of the Lord." What do you mean, quiet? When everything requires haste, when fear pushes you and time seems to run out? Yes, God orders a pause, a moment of deep surrender. Because sometimes deliverance doesn't come when we shake. It comes when we stop, when we finally understand that it is not by the strength of our arm, but by the power of his hand. Now, take a deep breath. Have you ever been in Moses' shoes? Not just surrounded by external enemies, but suffocated by internal pressures? A place where the past haunts you, the future seems impossible, and you're stuck in the present, not knowing what to do? Fear paralyzes. He convinces you that there is no way out. But Jesus reveals you. Paralysis is not the end. It's just the perfect stage for him to show himself as God who opens paths where no one sees. Is the sea still in front of you? Excellent, because that is exactly where God will open a way. There is a brutal difference between stopping out of despair and stopping out of faith. The people stopped screaming. Moses stopped listening, and that changed everything. Because in the midst of chaos, God does not ask us to rush. He asks us to listen. Maybe fear is paralyzing you because you still believe you need to move alone. But what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. The fear that stops you is the same place where God wants to reveal to you that it is not you who will open the way. It is He. Fear not. Be still. This is not passivity. This is surrender. It is the courage to let God be God. And maybe, just maybe, that's what's missing in your heart today. Stop trying to control everything. Stop feeling responsible for winning alone, and simply let heaven act. If this message spoke to your soul, comment, "Jesus, teach me to trust when everything says to be afraid." Your comment could be the encouragement someone desperately needs today. And if this message touched your heart, press the like button, because someone around you may be held back by fear, and your action will bring hope there. But something even more powerful is about to be revealed, because fear doesn't always come from external circumstances. Sometimes it arises when we feel like we've been completely forgotten. There was a sound of wind cutting through the solitude of the mountain. Elijah, the prophet of fire, was now just a hidden man, tired, broken inside. Sitting in the darkness of a cave, his face was no longer that of a victor in spiritual battles, but that of someone who had lost all hope, the same man who alone faced hundreds of prophets of Baal who saw the fire descend from the sky, now said with a choked voice, "Lord, enough is enough. Take my life." Yes, this same Elijah, who was used to shake an entire nation, now believed he was alone and forgotten. Abandonment has a very silent but deafening sound within the soul, and perhaps you know this sound well. When you pray and only hear the echo. When you wait and only find emptiness. Elijah was in this dark place. He fled, not from the soldiers, but from the unbearable feeling of being alone. to feel like all the effort was useless, that no one sees, that not even God cares anymore. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever reached a point where your heart, unable to bear the pain any longer, began to believe that heaven was silent by choice, as if God had given up on you? But this is where everything changes, because Jesus reveals to you a truth that breaks the weight of loneliness. God never stopped seeing, and he never stopped acting. Elias thought he was the only one, the last one, the rest. But God says firmly, almost like a healing whisper, "I still have 7,000 who have not bowed." Elijah was so consumed by pain that he no longer saw what God still held. And how often are we also blind to what remains, because we can only see what we have lost? This story shatters the illusion that being in a desert is the same as being forgotten. Elijah was not abandoned. He was being preserved. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. And that can be your truth today. The silence you feel, the loneliness that covers you, may actually be God's hiding place, a place where he cares for you as he prepares the next step. There is something that few realize. Here, God not only hears Elijah, he responds with direction. He restores. He feeds. He speaks in a soft voice. He doesn't fight Elijah's pain. He understands it, and yet it calls him back to the mission. If the fear of being alone has paralyzed you, if you wake up every day feeling like God is too far away, remember this. The fact that you don't see God acting doesn't mean he isn't acting. Take a deep breath. Let this truth wash over you. Heaven has never been silent about you. There is an invisible, deep, eternal care. A God who works even in the quietest behind the scenes of your life. Elijah wanted to give up, but God didn't give up on him. And he won't give up on you. Even when everything in you screams, "It's over," God whispers, "I still have 7,000. I still have plans. I still have resources. I still have hope." You are not as alone as you think. You are not invisible. You are being seen by a Father who knows even the sighs you never said out loud. If this word touched your soul, comment sincerely, "Lord, even in silence, I trust that you are with me." Your comment could reach the soul of someone who also needs to feel seen today. But still, there is another form of fear that invades our hearts and steals our peace. Not when we look back, not when we look within, but when we look into the future and it seems dark, uncertain, and scary. And here comes the most impressive part of this journey. The night had a heavy silence, the kind of silence that precedes the storm, not just of the sky, but of the soul. The disciples were in the boat with Jesus, crossing the sea. The wind started to blow stronger. The sky darkened suddenly, almost violently. The waves grew with a rush that was frightening, and in the blink of an eye, the sea became a threat. The boat, a safe shelter until then, became an unstable prison. And Jesus? I slept. That's right. I slept while everything seemed to fall apart. The scene is not just physical, it is spiritual, because this same sea, this same fear, this same feeling of "I don't know what will happen" is repeated today within many hearts. That's what anxiety is. The panic of losing control of what hasn't even happened yet. It is living today dominated by a tomorrow that has not yet arrived. And no matter how much faith you've learned, how much Bible you know, when the waves crash high, the human heart reacts with fear. The disciples, men who walked with Jesus, who had seen miracles, who had heard profound parables, panicked, and they said something that carries a pain that you may know well. "Master, do you not care if we perish?" It's not just a question. It's a desperate cry from someone who feels that God is silent while everything around them sinks. But then, the unexpected happens. Jesus gets up, and with an authority that breaks even natural logic, he speaks to the wind and the sea, "Be still, be silent." And there was a great bonanza. The sea calmed down. Chaos turned to calm. But before any external miracle, Jesus turns to the disciples and asks something that crosses time and reaches us. "Why are you so timid? Do you still not have faith?" This question is not an accusation. It's an invitation. a call to exchange fear of the future for trust in the God who is already there. Jesus reveals to you that the control you want so much was never yours. And that's good news, because if it were, you would sink. But he who calms winds and seas also calms hearts. How many times have you wasted entire nights thinking about what hasn't even happened yet? How many conversations have you created in your mind? How many tragedies have you anticipated? How many scenarios of pain have you lived through without ever leaving the place? This isn't just anxiety, it's an invisible prison. And Jesus came to free you from that too. Not just to save your soul, but to restore your peace. And there is something even deeper here. Jesus knew about the storm before he even got into the boat. He knew she would come. And yet he said, let's go over to the other side. When he says you will cross, what happens along the way is never the end of the story. Take a deep breath. Now, imagine Jesus standing up in the middle of your internal storm. Imagine him looking you in the eye and asking, do you trust me, even when everything seems out of control? You don't need to control the future. You just need to trust those who are already there. The faith that calms the sea is still alive, and it is being offered to you today. If this word spoke to your heart, comment, Jesus, I deliver my tomorrow into your hands. Your comment could be the reminder someone needs to find peace again. And if this message touched your heart, press the like button so that others can also be blessed. You never know who is going through a storm in silence, but what happens next could change the way you see everything. Because there is a pain that doesn't scream like the fear of the future, it whispers inside. It's the feeling of not being strong enough to endure another day. And that's exactly where the next revelation begins. Imagine living with the constant feeling of not measuring up, that everyone expects something from you, except yourself. This was Gideon's reality, a hidden man, literally. While the enemy stole everything around, Gideon pounded wheat in the winepress, a hidden, cramped space reserved for grapes, not grain. The image is powerful. He was trying to survive with the little he had in a place that wasn't even suitable. A scenario of fear and limitation. But then something completely out of logic happens. An angel of the Lord appears and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor." What do you mean, valuable? Gideon didn't feel that way. He was not a general. He was not a leader. He was not a warrior. He was the smallest of the smallest family of the smallest tribe. And his answer makes it clear. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Have you ever thought like this? Have you ever looked at your own life, full of pain, tiredness, demands, and asked, God, if you see me, why do I still feel so weak? It is at this exact point that Jesus reveals something that completely changes the way you see weakness. God does not choose the strong. He strengthens the chosen. And Gideon would be living proof of this. The call came not because he was ready, but because God would make him ready. God does not call you because of your strength. He calls you to show you his through your weakness. Maybe you've been trying to appear strong for too long. Maybe he smiled when he was falling apart. Maybe you led, supported, faced, while inside you, everything screamed for help. And maybe, like Gideon, you believed it wasn't enough, that your origin limits you, that your past defines you, that your weakness is proof that you are no good. But what if I told you that what you were taught about weakness is incomplete? Because the greatest miracle of Gideon's life was not defeating the Midianites. It was overcoming the fear that made him believe he was too small. God reduced his army from thousands to just 300 men. And why? So that he would know that victory would not come from human strength, but from the presence of God. And this revelation is transformative. Sometimes God allows everything to be reduced to the minimum, so that your faith can be elevated to the maximum. Gideon didn't have everything he needed until he believed. And you? Still waiting to feel strong to start? Jesus is telling you now, go in this strength of yours. Even if that strength seems fragile, even if it's just the courage to take a step, God will do the rest along the way. Have you ever felt this way? As if everyone around you is more prepared than you? As if God chose the wrong person? Gideon felt this way too. But the voice from heaven was stronger than the fear within, and today, that voice is echoing over you. Don't expect to feel capable. Just trust whoever calls you, because your weakness is the perfect stage for God's power to shine. It's not about being the strongest. It's about being the one who obeys, even when trembling, because obedience in weakness reveals miracles that strength would never reveal. If this message spoke to your soul, say with faith, "Lord, even though I am weak, I will go." Your comment could be the courage someone needs today to not give up, but that's not all. Something even deeper is about to be revealed, because there is a fear that hides behind smiles and memories, a fear of repeating the same mistakes, a fear that turns guilt into imprisonment. And that's exactly where the next story begins to reveal the path to true restoration. There was smoke in the air, a biting cold in the morning. The courtyard was full of murmurs, but Peter's heart was louder than any crowd. He had followed him from afar. Jesus was inside, being judged, mocked, betrayed. And Peter, the same one who had said, "I am ready with you until death," now trembled before a simple question. "Aren't you one of them too?" 1, 2, 3 times. And the last time was accompanied by curses and denials, as if denying in anger lessened the pain of having failed. Then the rooster crowed, and at that exact moment, Jesus looked at him. It wasn't a look of condemnation. It was the look of someone who knew and still loved. And Peter, he collapsed. Luke writes that he left there and wept bitterly, a cry you may know well, the cry of someone who knew what was right but chose the wrong path, the cry of someone who promised strength but delivered weakness, the cry of someone who fell again, making the same mistake. This is the kind of pain that grips the soul, the guilt that sticks to your conscience like a shadow, the fear of repeating past mistakes, the fear of, once again, disappointing. Have you ever felt this way? Like no matter how hard you try, you always end up falling back into the same patterns, the same flaws, the same words spoken that you wanted to remove from the world? It is at this point that Jesus reveals to you a truth that not only consoles, but frees you. Your fall does not define who you are. It is Jesus' response that defines. Peter failed, but Jesus' look in that courtyard was not the end. It was the beginning of a new beginning. Jesus did not cancel Peter. It didn't exclude him. On the contrary, resurrected, he made a point of calling him by name, and more, to restore not only the call, but the soul of Peter, asking 3 times, "Do you love me?" 1 for each. Denial. Maybe you are trapped in an emotional chain where the jailer is to blame. You may wonder, can I be forgiven again? And the answer is yes. Because the gospel is not about those who do not fail. It's about who comes back, even after failing. Heaven doesn't work with condemnation, it works with restoration. There is something profound here that few realize. Peter fell and came back. Judas fell and gave up. What separates them is not the severity of the error, but the fate of the pain. Peter took his pain to Jesus. Judas kept his inside until it exploded, and that changes everything. What you do with your guilt defines whether it will be a prison or a bridge. Peter became one of the greatest leaders of the early church. The same man who trembled before a servant would later preach in front of crowds with boldness, power, and grace. Why? Because he understood that Jesus' love is not fragile. It is immeasurable. He does not give up on repentant hearts. Never. You may have failed. It could have hurt. You may have promised yourself it would be different, and it wasn't. But the rooster crowed, and you still breathe. This means there is still time to start over. God does not call the perfect. He calls the willing, and He is willing to rewrite your story. Your shame can be turned into testimony. Your guilt can become healing for others. If this message spoke to your heart, sincerely comment, "Jesus, I am still yours, even with my flaws." Your comment could be the release someone needs to not give up today. And if this message touched your heart, press the like button so that others can also be reached by this restorative grace. Your simple gesture could be a sign of hope for someone on the verge of giving up, but there is a pain that goes even deeper. the fear of not being enough for anyone, the fear of being rejected before you even try. And what you'll hear now may change the way you understand true love. It was noon. The sun burned brightly on the dust on the ground, but that woman walked towards the well as if she carried an even greater weight inside. Every day she took the same route, alone. It wasn't just a search for water, it was an escape, avoidance of glances, comment leak, escape from judgment. And even if her feet walked to the well, what she really needed wasn't water. It was welcoming. It was a place where she didn't feel less, broken, unwanted. The fear of being rejected made her live on the sidelines in silence, avoiding other women, avoiding contact, avoiding life. But that afternoon, something out of the ordinary happened. A man was there, sitting, alone, and he spoke to her. Yes, he did. While so many ignored her, he saw her. While so many judged her, he treated her with dignity. While every other man in her life used or discarded her, this man, Jesus, called her into a conversation that would change everything. It wasn't just about water, it was about soul thirst. He said, "Whoever drinks the water I give him will never be thirsty again." And there, at that moment, something broke inside. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the woman no one wants around. She felt seen, known, and yet loved. Maybe you are carrying the same fear. Perhaps behind his attitudes, his independence, his strength, there is a wounded child who learned too soon that love came with conditions, that acceptance had a price, that no one really stayed. Maybe you've gotten used to rejection. Maybe you've even started to believe that's all you deserve. But that's when Jesus reveals something transformative to you. It's not about who rejected you. It's about who chooses you. Every day, even though they know everything about you. Jesus knew that woman's past. I knew about the 5 husbands. I knew about the current one. I knew about the leaks. And yet, he stayed. He spoke. He offered living water. He went to meet her in a place where no one else wanted to be. This breaks all logic, because the world teaches you that you need to prove your worth. But heaven says, I love you before you even try to justify yourself. And that changes everything. It doesn't matter who abandoned you, who humiliated you, who left you waiting. Jesus goes to the well where you hide. He sits, he waits, and he speaks to you, not as a pointer, but as a restorer. And if you think it's too late, that it's already past the point, that no one will see you as someone worthy of love anymore, take a deep breath. Jesus is here, now, speaking to his heart just as he spoke to hers. If you drink the water I give you, your deepest thirst will be quenched. Not physical thirst, but thirst to be truly loved, to be enough, to be accepted. The Samaritan woman dropped the water jar. What represented? His old routine, and ran to the city. The same city that ignored her now heard her message. Come and see a man who told me everything I have done. Is he not the Christ? What was shame became testimony. What was loneliness became a mission. This is what happens when true love meets a heart tired of rejection. If this word is touching you, comment sincerely. Jesus, even though you know everything about me, do you still want me? Your comment may reach someone who is also tired of feeling invisible, but that's not all. What comes next will confront you in unexpected ways, because there is another type of fear that is not hidden in loneliness, but in control. The fear of losing control of things, and with it, losing peace. And here comes one of the strongest stories about it. Sometimes the biggest battlefield isn't what happens to us, but what we can't control. That suffocating feeling that no matter how hard we try, things slip through our fingers. And it is exactly at this point that fear sets in. Fear of the unknown, of the uncertain, of what no longer depends on you. Maybe you are exactly there, holding on with all your strength to something that is already too heavy to carry, trying to keep up what deep down you know is falling apart. But what if I told you that there is a moment in the Bible where God intentionally asked someone to give up everything, including the thing they loved most? Abraham had already waited years for a promise, a son, a future, an offspring. And when Isaac finally arrived, joy invaded the heart of that elderly man. It was the fulfillment of a divine promise. But then, in one of those moments that destabilize any certainty, God asks something unthinkable. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and offer him as a sacrifice. Silence. No explanation. No because. Just one request, and the sky in silence. What would you do if God asked you for what you love most? How to deal with a command that tears your heart and defies all human logic? Abraham walked 3 days in silence with Isaac, and with each step, the fear hit stronger. Fear of losing control, fear of losing the child, fear of not understanding why. And maybe that's the point. God doesn't always want you to understand. Sometimes he wants you to trust. When Isaac asks where the lamb is, the answer that echoes is the key for those who feel like they are losing everything. God will provide. He didn't say how, not even when, not by whom. Just this: God will provide. A phrase that carries faith in the midst of uncertainty, peace in the midst of chaos, delivery in the midst of fear. This is when faith becomes more real, not when you understand the plan, but when you surrender to the God who charts the path. And at the most critical moment, when the knife was raised, when everything seemed like it was going to fall apart, God calls out from heaven and says, "Don't touch the boy." And then Abraham sees the lamb, the replacement, the provision. She was already there, all the time, but it only revealed itself at the moment of total delivery. How many times have you tried to control the outcome, the answer, the reaction of others, God's time? How many nights have you wasted trying to support with your own hands what deep down only God can sustain? The fear of not having control is real, but even more real is the love of a Father who never fails to provide in a timely manner. Jesus reveals to you that the control you try so hard to maintain may be preventing you from experiencing the miracle that only appears when you let go. As you hold, he watches, but when you deliver, he acts. Control was never security. It's an illusion, and faith begins right where control ends. It's not easy. Delivering hurts. Trusting without guarantees seems crazy, but it is in this soil of surrender that God's promises emerge. And perhaps he is inviting you today to do just that. Climb the mountain with your inner Isaac and say in faith, "Lord, I trust. You will provide." And if this message spoke deeply to you, write in the comments, "I deliver, Jesus." Declare it as an act of faith. Your comment could be the breath of courage that another soul needs to read today. If this message touched your heart, press the like button so that others can also be blessed. Your action can be God's instrument to free someone from the weight of control. But that's not all. There are times when what hurts most is not what God asks, but what he silences. And what happens when you cry out and he doesn't answer? The answer could change everything you think about divine silence. How many times have you tried to save something that seemed about to fall apart, feeling that if you let go for a moment, everything would slip through your fingers? Control. This false sense of security that we build brick by brick in fear that if we don't hold everything together, everything will fall apart. But what if I told you that there is a pain even more silent than loss? The pain of living trying to prevent it from happening. The fear of not having control is a prison disguised as self-protection. And it was within this emotional cell that we found the story of a man who heard from God the most disconcerting order of his entire life. Abraham had already lived years of promise and waiting. I had dreamed, suffered, hoped, cried, and when the answer arrived, a son, the long-awaited Isaac, it seemed like the cycle was complete. But it was in this moment of stability that God made the request that would break any heart. Take your son, your only son whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering. There was no explanation. There was no, "Trust me, everything will be fine," just silence. And a command that confronted not only Abraham's faith, but his love, his reason, his humanity. 3 days of walking to Mount Moriah, 3 days in, which every step felt like a cut in the heart. And perhaps, without realizing it, you are experiencing exactly that, walking with something you love towards an altar of surrender, carrying on your shoulders the fear of losing what you value most. fighting to maintain control as God asks you to let go. Quit your job. Let that person go. Release the plan. But how? What if I lose everything? What if it goes wrong? And it was exactly in this place that Abraham positioned himself. Isaac asks, "Father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb?" And the answer that came from the soul of a man torn apart inside was a declaration of faith that echoes to this day as an antidote to the fear of control. God will provide. He didn't say, "I understand." I didn't say, "I'm sure." But he declared something that you may need to declare right now. God will provide. Because true faith is not an assembled logic. It is a surrender in the midst of chaos. It's not certainty of the result. It's confidence in the character of whoever is in charge. The moment Abraham raises the knife, something explodes in the spiritual world. God shouts from the heavens, "Abraham, don't touch the boy." And at that moment, he sees what he didn't see before. The lamb trapped in the bush. The provision was already there, but it only revealed itself at the highest point of the surrender. And here is the truth that Jesus reveals to you today. The control you struggle to maintain may be hiding the miracle that God wants to manifest. Abraham did not lose Isaac, but he had to be willing to lose to discover that God never intended to take him, but to show the depth of his faithfulness. This story is not about a sacrifice, it's about trust, about surrender, about the kind of faith that defies logic and frees from fear. Because when you give everything away, you give God room to do everything, and you? What have you been trying to control for fear of losing? Your family, your health, your future? How long have you been carrying this burden alone, thinking it's your responsibility to keep everything going? But Jesus is saying, let go. I'm the lamb caught in the bush, the provision you don't see yet. He is in this valley with you. And while you try to control, he watches. But when you deliver, he acts. Maybe today is the day to take a deep breath and say, Jesus, I let go, I trust. Maybe it's time to stop fighting against what is beyond your reach and make space for the sky to move in your favor. Your surrender can be the beginning of your miracle. If this message touched your heart, press the like button so that others can also be blessed. Your gesture can be the bridge between someone and the provision they have not yet seen. And if you feel that this word was a divine help to your heart, write in the comments with faith, I deliver, Jesus. May this act be a spiritual surrender, a typed prayer that frees your soul from the prison of control. Your comment could be, the breath of courage another soul needs to let go, but what if the greatest suffering was not the pain of loss, but the anguish of silence? What if God, even though he was silent, was closer than ever? What happens when heaven seems silent, but God is already acting for you? Have you ever cried out with all your strength, cried until you lost your voice, waited with a tired heart, and still nothing happened? Have you ever felt like your prayers were hitting the ceiling, that the sky was closed, and God's silence hurt more than the pain itself that led you to seek an answer? There is an anguish that does not scream. It whispers in the soul, has he left me? And when this thought invades the heart, faith begins to tremble. But there is a story in the Bible that exposes God's silence like no other text, the story of Job. Job was an upright, righteous, God-fearing man, and yet he lost everything. In a single breath, stability turned to dust, your possessions, your children, your health. And when all this fell, Job did what many would do. He sought God. But unlike what is expected of a faithful servant, God did not respond. Days and nights passed in silence. Friends came with harsh words trying to explain the inexplicable. His wife, broken by grief, suggested that he give up everything, even his own faith. And still, no answer came from the heavens. No explanation, no signal, just silence. Maybe you are in exactly that place right now. You pray, you wait, but the only thing he gets is silence. It's not the tears that hurt the most, it's the echo of them returning unanswered. And this is where the soul begins to doubt whether it has been heard. The fear of God's silence is not the fear of his absence. It is the fear of being alone in the storm. And even surrounded by people, you feel like no one understands, because what you need isn't advice, it's comfort. It's not about theories, it's about presence. And silence hurts. But what if I told you that this silence hides something? That there is a secret kept precisely on the days when God seems silent. Job spent 41 chapters crying out, questioning, anguish, and God remained silent. But in chapter 42, something changes. God finally speaks. And it doesn't give explanations. It gives a revelation. He does not justify silence. He reveals himself through it. And Job, with a broken heart, releases a sentence that summarizes the greatest spiritual transformation ever recorded in the midst of pain. I used to know you from hearsay, but now my eyes see you. Jesus reveals to you, God's silence is not indifference. It is preparation, because there are truths that only silence reveals. There are depths that only the apparent absence of God can dig into our soul. Job did not know a God who explained everything. He knew a God who supported, even when he did not speak. And perhaps what is hurting you is not the lack of response, but the false idea that God is gone. He never left. He is there, in the silence, observing your faith, testing its structure, preparing something that you cannot yet see. What if the lack of response is actually the most profound response? What if what God is building is so big that it can only be done in the dark, away from the noise, where your soul learns to recognize the whisper? Because sometimes it is in silence that faith stops being superficial and becomes conviction. What if instead of asking, God, why don't you speak, you started asking, what are you teaching me in the silence? The answer will not come in words. It will come in transformation. In the end, Job not only regained everything he had lost, he discovered something no one could take away: intimacy with God. And this is what is being formed in you now. Don't ignore the silence. It may be shaping your spiritual identity. Your story is not at a standstill. It is being written in silence, with invisible tears that God collects one by one. And believe me, He is closer than you imagine. If this message touched your spirit, comment with faith, I trust in God's silence. May your comment be a cry of faith in the midst of silence, a living testimony of someone who does not need proof to continue believing. May your statement reach others who, like you, thought they were alone. And remember, silence was never absence. It was just the interval between the cry and the miracle. But that's not all. What if what you call the end, God is using as the beginning of everything? Brace yourself, because what comes next will challenge everything you've been taught about. Loss. The next story will prove that, with Jesus, not even death has the last word. The silence is over, but what comes now is even more profound. Because if there is a fear that inhabits all souls, even those who believe, it is the fear of death. Not just physical death, but irreversible loss. The goodbye that never comes back. The end that seems definitive. Death haunts in layers. The mourning for those who left, the fear of losing those we love, and perhaps the most silent of all, the fear of disappearing without leaving a purpose. And it was exactly in this scenario that Jesus cried. Yes, Jesus cried. And he did not weep because of death itself, but because of the pain it causes. When Lazarus died, Martha and Mary sent messengers. They hoped that Jesus would come in time. They knew his power. They believed that if he arrived earlier, death would not win. But Jesus took time. He knew their suffering. I knew the urgency, but he chose to wait. And when it finally arrived, it was too late. Lazarus was already dead, buried, 4 days. The body already smelled bad. Death had won. At least that's what everyone believed. And perhaps today you are experiencing the same despair. You waited for Jesus to come before the loss. You prayed, fasted, he cried, but what you feared so much happened. And now the pain paralyzes you. Maybe it wasn't the death of someone, but the death of a dream, of a marriage, of a hope that had been gestating in prayer for years. And just when you thought God would intervene, everything fell apart. The tomb closed. Silence turned to mourning. But what if I told you that Jesus' timing is never late? It's divine strategy. What if I revealed to you that When everything seems hopeless, that is exactly where glory manifests itself most strongly, because it was before a closed tomb, with the smell of death permeating the air, that Jesus uttered the most powerful words ever spoken about eternity. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Jesus reveals to you death is not an end point. It is a comma in the eternal narrative of purpose. Because when everything dies, Jesus does not come in with comfort. He enters with resurrection. He doesn't deal with death the way men do. He confronts her. He beats her. He turns grief into testimony. The story of Lazarus is not about a delayed miracle. It is about a God who waits for the right moment to reveal a glory greater than healing, resurrection. Martha's pain was real. Maria's anguish was legitimate. Both believed, but limited Jesus to earthly time. And that's what so many of us do. We believe in a powerful God, but one who must act on our agenda. And when he waits, we think he has forgotten us. But no, Jesus knew exactly what he would do. He wasn't far away. He was waiting for the perfect scene so that no one else would get credit, so that the glory would be his, and their faith would be taken to a new level. Lazarus came out of the tomb not only to return to life, but to prove that, with Jesus, not even death is the end. The presence of death does not cancel the promise of life. And today, perhaps your heart is in silent mourning. Maybe something inside you has died, a passion for life, a calling, a hope, a desire to continue. And you may look fine on the outside, but on the inside, you're buried. 4 days, smell of giving up, total silence. But even in this scenario, Jesus is coming. And he is not late. He's about to call you by name. Imagine now, the sky opening up, Jesus looking you in the eye and saying, "Come out." This is how the new chapter begins, not with answers, but with presence, not with explanations, but with power. The same one who raised Lazarus is calling you today. And it doesn't matter how much time has passed, nor the state of what died, because whoever has the last word on life is life. If this message resonated with your pain, write in the comments with faith and courage. Jesus, call my name. Your comment could be the turning point for someone who is also facing the tomb of their own hope. It could be the spark that reignites a tired heart. Because when we declare our faith, even in the midst of pain, we make room for the impossible for God to act. And if you think that was the peak, wait, because what comes next will change everything you think about. Love, redemption, and reconnection. There's a story about to be told, where a lost son discovers he was never out of his father's reach. The pain of death leaves marks, but there is an even quieter, more corrosive wound, the fear of not being loved, and the most painful. It's not about not being loved by others. It's fearing that not even God has space in his heart for you anymore, that after everything he did, everything he thought, everything he felt, he gave up. May grace have a limit. May heaven no longer be an open door, but a locked gate. And it is here, in this abyss of self-contempt, that the story of the prodigal son explodes into mercy. Jesus tells of a young man who asked his father for his inheritance ahead of time, an unthinkable request. It was like saying, "I wish you were dead." He turns his back, his heart proud and his pockets full. He leaves in search of freedom, pleasure, and identity. But freedom without purpose becomes prison. The search for pleasure turns into hunger, and the attempt to build an identity far from its origin always ends in ruin. This son loses everything: money, friends, dignity. The only thing he has left is shame. He sinks so much that he starts fighting for food with the pigs. And that's exactly where many of us have been, or perhaps are now, when the heart looks around and says, "I am no longer worth anything." When the accuser's voice whispers, "Now it's too late." When the reflection in the mirror no longer reminds you of who you were. But it was at this rock bottom that he had a thought.
Perhaps it was not perfect repentance. It was not mature faith. It was desperation. It was hunger. And even though
He crawls inside, he gets up, and decides to return. Now imagine this scene. He rehearses the words, embarrassed. stepping on each step as if he were carrying chains. But what he didn't know was that his father was waiting for him, not with eyes of condemnation, but with eyes of love. When he was still far away, his father saw him. The father ran, hugged, kissed. His father didn't even let him finish his speech. Love interrupted the guilt. Grace silenced shame. Jesus reveals to you, you never stopped being seen. Even when he ran away, even when it fell, even when you felt invisible, the Father watched you from afar, waiting for the moment when you would look back. What's more, he doesn't have his arms crossed. He runs to meet you, because God's love is not a coin that is lost. It is an inheritance that cannot be broken. We often convince ourselves that in order to be loved, we need to fix ourselves first, that God only accepts improved versions of us. But this story dismantles that lie. The son came back stinking of mud, with a broken heart, without dignity, and yet he was received with a celebration, because God's love is not based on appearance, performance, or past. He loves us for who we are, not what we have done. And maybe today you are feeling like that son, not because he physically left the house, but because he distanced himself in silence, because you sank into habits, choices, or guilt that made you doubt your worth. And the further you move away, the more you believe that God has rejected you. But here's a truth you may never have heard like this. God still runs toward you. The Father's love is not conditioned on your performance. He loves you on the way back, not just when you're clean. He runs even while you are still dirty. He prepares the table while you still feel ashamed. And he dresses you in new clothes before you even say, "Forgive me." Because in heaven, repentance is not a reason for punishment. It is a reason for celebration. This story shows us that the greatest pain is not the mistake, but the lie that the mistake makes us unworthy of love. And if the enemy managed to convince you that you are beyond the reach of grace, today that lie is being undone. You need to hear this with an open heart. You are still a son. She's still a daughter. No fall, no decision, no sin is capable of erasing this seal. The ring is reserved. The sandal is ready. The tunic was separated. The banquet is being prepared. And you know what's most impressive? The prodigal son did not seek acceptance. He sought survival. But what he found was celebration. Maybe you feel like you're asking for too much when you just want peace. But what Jesus wants to give you is a party. It's restoration. It's reconnection with the love that never stopped pursuing you. If this word found you in the midst of your guilt, your shame, or your silence, declare in the comments with faith, "I am a son and I am coming back," because this statement can break chains. It can rekindle hope. It may inspire others who, like you, wonder if there is still a way back. And if you think that was strong, brace yourself. Because the next story will touch on something that many avoid talking about, but that consumes sleepless nights. The fear of not having enough. A fear that reveals much more about the heart than the bank account. A story where what little is given with faith turns into a miracle. Sometimes what keeps us up at night is not the pain of the past, nor the fear of the future, but a much more silent and cruel urgency. Not knowing if what we have is enough for today. This is the pain of lack, the anguish of looking inside and realizing that, despite all your efforts, there never seems to be enough. Time, money, energy, support, answers. The fear of scarcity is not just about an empty plate or a zero account. It settles in the soul when we feel that we have nothing left to offer, neither to others nor to ourselves. And it is exactly in this type of scenario that Jesus reveals something that transcends logic. The crowd was immense. There were 5,000 men plus women and children, a hungry people physically and spiritually. People who had left everything to follow Jesus, with dirty feet, broken hearts, and tired eyes. When the disciples look at that mass of people and say, "Master, dismiss the people, because we have nothing to give them," Jesus responds with something disconcerting. "You give them something to eat." And in that moment, the impossible was exposed. 5 loaves and 2 fish. That was it. What would you do if you had thousands of needs in front of you and almost nothing in your hands? This story isn't just about food. It talks about the feeling of inadequacy, from that inner emptiness that screams, "I don't have what it takes." And the most powerful thing here is that Jesus didn't ask them to have much. He just asked them to hand over a little. And when we put the little we have in God's hands, the miracle happens not through quantity, but through obedience. Jesus reveals to you, enough was never about human measurement, but about the disposition of the heart. Divine provision is not activated when everything is right, but when trust overcomes fear. That boy who delivered the loaves and fish could have thought, "This isn't even enough for my family, let alone the crowd." But he trusted. And in heaven, trust has more value than numbers. What was multiplied was not the bread. It was faith. Have you ever felt like your faith was too small? That his strength was running out? That your salary doesn't cover your needs? That your attention isn't enough to take care of everything? This is the perfect field for a miracle, because human scarcity is the soil where God's abundance flourishes, not because you will deserve it, but because he has already decided to take care of you. Now stop for a second and imagine every person in that crowd eating. Not a bite, but eating and having enough. This is in the Word. They all ate and were satisfied. There was no rationing, it was not controlled. The miracle was not measured in drops. It was poured out like a river. The presence of Jesus is the only answer to the fear of lack, and not just material. Lack of peace, lack of direction, lack of self-love. He takes the little and turns it into more than enough. But for that, there needs to be delivery, and that's the hardest part. Letting go of what little we have. Because fear often makes us hold on tighter. It makes us hide. It makes us control. But when you deliver, what is in your hands leaves the world of limitation and enters the field of multiplication. The Bible says there were still baskets left, because when God acts, he doesn't just deliver the essentials, it overflows. The miracle was not just satiating the moment. It proved that, in the kingdom, no one returns with less than what they arrived with. And that changes everything, because it means that your pain, your prayer, your tears are not in vain. God doesn't just sustain you, he surprises you. Have you ever found yourself asking, what if I miss it? What if you lack the strength to continue? What if there is no faith tomorrow? What if the basics are missing? Jesus responds with an attitude. He takes the bread in his hands, lifts it to the heavens, gives thanks for the little, and shares it. Gratitude before multiplication, because whoever is grateful for the little frees heaven for the much. And maybe today, all you have is a tired heart, a forced smile, a limited breath. But if you put it in his hands, he will do more with your little than you could with everything. The fear of lack is overcome when we trust that God is the Father and that his love is abundant. He knows your bills, your anxieties, your unspoken need. And before you even ask, he is already preparing the provision. Not in your time, but at exactly the right time. Because a miracle is not a delay, it is divine precision. Now close your eyes and take a deep breath. Feel this word entering your heart. Imagine Jesus looking at you and saying, "What do you have in your hands? Don't belittle what you carry." Because that is exactly what he will use to multiply hope, strength, direction, and rest. If this word touched your heart, write in the comments with faith, "God, I trust my little in your hands." And let this statement echo as a seed of faith for others who also face the fear of not having enough. Your comment could be an answer to someone who is in despair right now. And since we're talking about something powerful, what comes next may touch something even deeper. Because the greatest need of human beings is not always food or money, but value. And when the world labels you insignificant, there is a God who calls you chosen. Get ready for a turning point that will change the way you see yourself. The fear of scarcity can hurt, but there is a wound that silences even the strongest. The feeling of having no value, of looking at yourself and not seeing anything worth noticing. To go through environments where everyone is seen except you. Perhaps this is one of the cruelest wounds of the soul. The pain of not being remembered, of not being chosen, of not being celebrated. And this wound has a name: silent rejection. It is in this place that David appears in history. Samuel had been ordered by God to anoint a new king, The task was clear. Go to Jesse's house and there, among his sons, find the one who would carry the destiny of a nation. Jesse then lines up his sons before the prophet. Tall, strong, prepared men. Samuel, impressed, thinks, "This is definitely the one." But God interrupts him with a profound and eternal revelation. Man looks on the outside, but the Lord looks on the heart. But among those men, there was an absence, a son who wasn't even called, a name that was not remembered, a boy forgotten, at the back of the house taking care of sheep. That was David, forgotten by his father, ignored by his brothers, excluded from the ceremony, but not forgotten by God. Jesus reveals to you, the value that heaven gives you does not depend on the memories of others, nor on the place you occupy in the line of life. The value that God sees in you is greater than any title, resume, appearance, or reputation. The world may ignore you, but God sees you. While no one calls you, He has already anointed you. David didn't need to introduce himself, justify himself, or stand out, because when God chooses, He seeks in anonymity the heart that is ready for the throne. And maybe today you are just like David, forgotten in the field. You work, you serve, you give your best, but no one recognizes it. Nobody asks how you are, nobody thanks you. And little by little you start to believe that maybe it really isn't worth it. This is the enemy's deception. He wants to make you believe that only those who are applauded matter. But the truth is that in the kingdom, value does not arise from visibility. It is born from the essence. How many times have you thought, if I disappear, no one will notice? How many times has your heart been silent for fear of being a nuisance, of not being heard? How many times have you looked in the mirror and seen no purpose? But what if I told you that what you were taught about value is incomplete? Because true value is not measured by external achievements. It reveals itself in how much God you carry inside. David did not get there by human merit. He arrived because God saw him when no one was looking, when he sang alone among the sheep, when he wrote psalms in silence, when he trained with the sling, without an audience. There in the field, David was formed, and the field is exactly where God forms those He will exalt. The field is a place of anonymity, but also of empowerment. You know that moment when everything seems to stand still? That phase of life when you feel like no one notices what you do? It's the field. But the field is not punishment. It's preparation. It's where God looks at you and says, even though no one sees, I see. And the look of God is different from the look of the world. While the world sees status, God sees delivery. While the world sees appearance, God sees truth. While the world seeks perfection, God seeks a broken heart. The Lord sees the heart. This phrase is a watershed because it frees us from the need to please everyone. It frees us from the burden of always proving something. It shows us that we can be ourselves with our pains and limitations and still be chosen. Do you ever feel like you are in the field, ignored, isolated, invisible? Then this message is for you, because it was precisely in the field that God raised the greatest king of Israel. It was in the countryside that the psalmist was born. It was in the field that the anointing found the despised. If you feel that no one sees value in you, know that the whole of heaven has its eyes fixed on your heart. God does not need a stage to see His faithfulness. He doesn't need the spotlight to lift you up. And when He decides to anoint you, it doesn't matter who forgot your name, because He has already written your name on the palms of His hands. Close your eyes for a moment and allow yourself to believe you have value, not because the world says so, but because God has already decided this since your mother's womb. No failure, no mistake, no word of rejection has the power to erase this. If this message touched something deep within you, write in the comments, God, even in the field, I know that you see me. This statement is not just a comment. It is a confession of faith. It is a response to the lie of insignificance. And perhaps by writing this, you are breaking chains of low self-esteem that you have carried for years. And the strongest comes now. Because if the fear of being worthless has already made you hide, the next fear is even more cruel, that of living surrounded by people, but still feeling alone. And this pain, when it penetrates, can imprison even the strongest soul. What you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. Sometimes the sound of silence is more deafening than 1,000 voices screaming. The house is full, but the heart empty. The days go by, and even with notifications, messages, appointments, and interactions, something inside screams for help. Does anyone really see me? Loneliness is not always physical. Often it hides in forced smiles, in happy posts, in voices that are excited on the outside, but that, on the inside, are begging for true company. And perhaps you know this feeling better than you would. Like the feeling of being surrounded by people but emotionally alone, of lying down at night with a lump in your throat, wishing someone, anyone, would ask, "Are you really okay?" Not in a polite way, but with the intention of listening. It was in this place of deep isolation that we found Paul, whipped, humiliated, arrested for doing good. After freeing a young girl from an evil spirit, Paul and Silas were dragged through the streets, wrongly, accused, and thrown into prison. And it wasn't just any cell. It was the deepest, the darkest, the coldest, hands tied, feet stuck in the trunk, the pain in the body, but perhaps more than all that, the pain in the soul. Because nothing corrodes the spirit more than feeling like you have been forgotten in the place of suffering. But then something extraordinary happened. Instead of complaints, praise. Instead of silence, chant. Instead of lament, worship. Paulo and Silas, in that abandoned cell, decided to raise a song. At midnight, while the city slept, while its tormentors rested, while injustice seemed to win, two men sang. And they didn't sing because they were well. They sang because even there they knew they were not alone. Jesus reveals you, loneliness. Screams when we forget who walks with us in the invisible. Paul's cell was not empty. All of heaven was present there. Praises were not an escape from pain, but a response to the presence of God. To praise in the midst of abandonment is to declare, "I believe that even without anyone here, the Lord is." How many times have you felt in your own emotional prison, surrounded by walls that no one sees, chained to thoughts that no one understands, screaming inside while everyone says you look so good? Maybe today you are exactly like Paul, hurt, forgotten, with a tired soul. But there is one detail that can change everything. God is with you, even in the dark. And not only that, He hears your silent praise. He hears even the most muffled sigh. And when you worship in the midst of pain, something supernatural happens. The word says that suddenly there was an earthquake. The chains broke, the doors opened. But pay attention, the miracle was not external liberation, it was internal freedom. Because even with the doors open, Paulo did not run away. He knew that true freedom is knowing that God is with you, even in the dark. And here's what no one tells you. Sometimes, solitude is the stage where God reveals His presence in the most intimate way. He silences the noises of the world so you can hear the whisper of grace. He allows isolation, not to hurt you, but to find you there. Because when everyone leaves, He remains. Have you ever wanted to scream inside? Have you ever cried in silence, feeling invisible? Have you ever wanted a hug that never came? So no, Paulo was also in that place. And it was in this place that he discovered the beauty of a God who does not abandon, who does not withdraw, who does not sleep, and who is present in the cell, in the dark room, in the mind at war, in the anxious heart. Do you know what moves me most about this story? It's just that while Paulo and Silas sang, the other prisoners listened. This means that your worship in the valley is a seed of hope for those around you. Even in pain, you can be light. Even in tears, you can be healing. Even if you feel alone, God can use you to touch someone. And maybe right now you are being like Paul. Even without strength, you continue. Even though you're scared, you sing. Even though you miss being heard, you remain faithful. And that's why this word is for you. If this message is touching your heart, tell us in the comments. Even alone, I believe that God is with me. Write, not just for me. Write as an act of faith, like a cry of hope, like a landmark in your spirit. Because your every word could be the thread that connects another soul who is also feeling alone right now. And your comment could be the encouragement someone needs today. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. When Paul was freed, he didn't run far away. He stayed to heal the jailer. The man who trapped him now needed saving. This is the kingdom. God turns pain into mission, the prison at altar, loneliness in revelation. Jesus reveals to you, loneliness is not the end. It is the meeting point between your soul and eternity. It is the space where the sky touches the earth within you. It's where he embraces you from the inside out, when no one else can. But something even deeper is about to be revealed. Because if the fear of loneliness paralyzes you inside, imagine the impact of living trapped by shame, the one that makes you lower your eyes, hide your face, and run away from God's love. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you've believed about guilt and redemption. The soul that survives loneliness often still needs to deal with a more silent and devastating prison, shame. Because unlike loneliness, which is absence, shame is weight. A weight that cannot be seen but that suffocates, that drags with you wherever you go, that hides in downcast eyes, in disguised smiles, in conversations where you don't allow yourself to show who you really are. And not because you don't want to, but because, deep down, you believe that if people knew the truth, if they knew everything, they would leave. This is the pain of the woman caught in adultery, dragged through the streets, pushed into the middle of the crowd. There is no name. There is no defense. Just shame. She didn't have time to explain herself. No right to protect yourself. Her mistakes were torn from the secret room and thrown on the floor before men ready to stone her. They didn't just want to punish her. They wanted to expose her, hurt your dignity, turn your story into a spectacle of public humiliation. And the cruelest? It's just that maybe this woman already carried enough shame to destroy herself alone. How many times have you felt this way? As if your mistakes define who you are, as if the past was a scar that everyone can see, and that's why you don't deserve love, you don't deserve a fresh start, you don't deserve God. But Jesus reveals something to you that changes everything. He doesn't look at you the way men do. When accusers point the finger, he ducks. When everyone screams, condemnation, he writes in the sand. And when shame holds you down, Jesus lifts you up with healing words. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. John 8:11. This phrase, simple and direct, carries more power than 1,000 sermons, because it reveals the heart of a God who does not deny error, but also does not bind anyone to it. Jesus does not ignore what has been done, but he also does not reduce anyone's identity to their failures. He sees what no one else sees. The pain behind the mistake, the regret that no one sees, the soul that cries out for mercy even in silence. This woman, thrown to the ground in shame, had the privilege that many never imagine having, meeting Jesus. Gaze at the exact moment she was awaiting punishment, and that look didn't come with harshness, came with redemption. Do you feel like her today? Dragged inside, even if everything looks fine on the outside, trying to hide the fragments of your story, trying to prove you're strong but wallowing in guilt that no one sees? So listen, Jesus is still writing in the sand. Even today, he is bowed at your side. And even today, he continues to say, neither do I condemn you. And no, this is not permission to continue in error. It is an invitation to a new path. Because when Jesus lifts us from shame, he doesn't just clean up what we've done. He restores what we've lost: dignity, worth, purpose. Perhaps the most powerful part of this story is not forgiveness, but freedom from the gaze of others. Because while everyone focused on sin, Jesus focused on the soul. While the crowd saw a sinner, he saw a daughter. And this truth needs to explode inside you now. You are not what they made you. It's not what they did to you. It's not the mistake you made. You are what Jesus declares about you. And do you know what he declares? Forgiveness, new beginning, freedom, love. This is what breaks the shame. It's not pretending that nothing happened. It's knowing that even with everything that has happened, Jesus still chooses to walk with you. And that changes everything. If this message spoke to your heart, write in the comments, Jesus frees me from shame. Don't write out of obligation. right like someone rising from the ground, like someone who decides that they will no longer live burdened by guilt, as someone who accepts the Father's loving gaze and rejects the judgment of the crowd. And the most impressive thing about this story? The accusers left, one by one. They realized that no one there was without fault, that everyone in some way also carried their shame. And you? Maybe he carries an old shame, hidden for years. Maybe you've made mistakes that make you feel unworthy to even pray. But Jesus reveals to you, shame is not the end. It is the place where grace manifests itself in the most scandalous way. Because while the world wants to expose, Jesus covers. While the world wants to punish, he restores. And if today you feel ashamed to even lift your eyes, know that Jesus doesn't wait for you to fix yourself to love you. He loves you now, here, just the way you are. And that love doesn't leave you the same. It transforms you. But what you're about to discover will challenge everything you believed about suffering and redemption. Because the next story will reveal how God transforms the evil they did against you into a good so powerful that it changes the destiny of many. Prepare yourself for a truth that will break chains deep within you. Shame is one of the quietest pains anyone can carry. But there is an even deeper type of pain, the prison of the past. Because unlike shame, which exposes you to others, the past chains you inside. And you can smile on the outside, go about your routine, pretend that everything is fine. But there is a point inside your soul that is still frozen in time. A scene that comes back every night. A memory that brings tears to tears in moments of silence. A guilt that, even after years, still speaks louder than your prayer. Have you ever felt this? Maybe the name of your pain is abandonment, or maybe betrayal. Maybe it's the trauma of being rejected as a child, or the mistake you made and never managed to forgive yourself. And no matter how many days pass, it seems like nothing changes. It looks like you're walking, but stuck, dreaming, but chained, living, but afraid that it will come back. And if it comes back, what if all that happens again? That's why this story is so necessary. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers, betrayed, humiliated, forgotten by those who should protect him. They threw him into a dry well and then sold him as if he were any other object. Years later, even though he had achieved honor and power in Egypt, even wearing princely clothes, he carried within himself a past of rejection that no one could see. Until the unthinkable happens. The brothers who betrayed him appear before him, begging for help. And there, in that moment of tension, everything could fall apart. But then Joseph looks back and says something that changes everything. You intended evil against me, but God meant it for good. Genesis 50:20. This is one of the most liberating statements in the Bible, because Jose doesn't deny what happened. He doesn't pretend he wasn't hurt, but he decides that what hurt him will no longer rule his life. Have you ever thought about how much the past still influences you? In decisions that you avoid for fear of repeating the mistake? In relationships that you don't live for fear of being rejected again? In the doors that you don't open because you remember what went wrong last time? Jesus reveals to you today, the past does not have the right to steal your future. What if I told you that the biggest mistake of your life could be precisely the point where God wants to manifest the greatest miracle? That what hurt you so much was not the end of your story. It was the seed of the purpose that you will still live. This is the turning point. What Joseph suffered was real. His pain was legitimate. But he understood that when we surrender our wounds to God, they stop being walls and become bridges. Because what Joseph's brothers used to destroy him was precisely what put him in the place of governing and saving lives. It was in Egypt that he fed nations. It was from the throne that he embraced those who betrayed him. And do you know what this teaches us? That true liberation is not forgetting the past. It is looking at it without fear, no pain, with peace, and with the conviction that Jesus has already rewrote everything with grace. Can you imagine this for your life? Can you free yourself from memories that still hold you back? Can you believe that what hurt you can become healing for others through you? If this word touched your heart, declare in the comments, Jesus redefines my past. Write with faith. Write as if to say, I am no longer a prisoner of what was done to me. I am not what happened to me. I am what God is doing in me. And if this message lit something inside you, if it was like a light where there was only pain, then click like. Because your like can be God's tool to reach those who are still stuck in painful memories. It's more than a button. It's an act of faith, a seed of hope for someone. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. Joseph didn't just forgive, he embraced. He cried with his brothers. He restored the relationship. He fed those who betrayed him. And that wasn't weakness. It was power. Because whoever is healed by Jesus no longer lives from the wound. He lives from the purpose. And you might think, but I'm not like Joseph. I still bleed inside. And Jesus reveals to you, not even Jose started out like this. He was shaped. He was cured. And you will be too. Because the same God who was with him at the well, in the prison, and in the palace is with you now. The difference? Jose did not stop in pain. He walked until he saw redemption. And you will see it too. There are pains that don't come from what was done to us, but from the time that doesn't seem to pass. Next, let's delve into the soul of someone who waited for years for an answer and discovered that in God, time is never a waste. Get ready? Because the coming revelation can even transform your spiritual clock. What if time is not just passing, but teaching? This is a question that few dare to truly face. Because waiting is one of the greatest tests of the soul. We're not talking about a queue, traffic, or something small. We are talking about waiting for something that burns in the heart, a dream you've been carrying for years, a miracle for which he prays with tears, whole nights, an answer that never seems to arrive. And the hardest thing of all is silence, the feeling that God has forgotten, that he heard everyone except you. It is in this place of waiting that many give up, that many question their faith, that many turn away, because time messes with old wounds, rekindles insecurities, and the cunning enemy whispers, if God really loved you, he would have done something already. But Jesus reveals to you that there is something sacred happening in the waiting, something invisible to the eye, but that changes everything inside. Anna knew well what that was. She wanted a child more than anything in life, but year after year, all I saw was an empty belly and a heavier heart. To top it off, she was provoked by those who had what she dreamed of. And maybe you understand exactly. That pain, seeing others receive what you ask for in prayer. See miracles happening all around while yours seems forgotten in the sky. But Anna didn't give up. She didn't just pray, she poured out her soul before God. He cried, fasted, cried out with his heart in pieces, until, on an ordinary day, something extraordinary happens. The priest sees Anna praying, thinks she is drunk, but she responds with something that chills the soul. I have not drunk wine or strong drink, but I have poured out my soul before the Lord. 1 Samuel 1:15. This sentence changes everything, because she reveals that Anna understood the purpose of waiting, to pour out. Shed the anxiety, the frustration, the fear of it not happening. Anna transformed pain into devotion, and when I least expected it, the impossible manifested itself. I prayed for this boy, and the Lord answered my prayer. 1 Samuel 1:27. Do you realize what this means? That waiting was never about God delaying. It was about God preparing, not just the miracle, but you. Because what is born from waiting on God is not fragile. It is firm, mature, full of purpose. Anna didn't just welcome a son. She gave birth to Samuel, one of Israel's greatest prophets. And here comes a revelation that can heal your soul now. Jesus reveals to you that your waiting is not punishment. It is construction. That God is not silent. He is working behind the scenes. And when he releases the promise, everything that seemed barren blooms at once. But I know, there are days when you feel like you can't take it anymore, where waiting turns into exhaustion, in which the heart gets tired of believing. And in these moments, the greatest faith is not the one that moves mountains. It is the one that remains when everything seems to stand still. The faith that Anna had. Faith that stands the test of time. The faith that refuses to give up. Maybe you are there now, tired of praying for something that seems too far away. You may even feel embarrassed for still waiting. But listen to this with an open heart. Heaven doesn't work in a hurry. It works with precision. And God's clock is never late. When He says now, nothing can stop it. Therefore, do not bury your cry. Don't abandon your faith, because the waiting time may seem long, but the response time is always perfect. And what God is generating within you in this process is as precious as the miracle you expect. If this message touched something deep in your heart, comment with faith. Lord, I hope in you. Let this phrase be your prayer today, not as someone who waits with anxiety, but as someone who chooses to trust, even without understanding. Because trust is loving God above time, above what meets the eye, above what the heart feels. And if that word felt like a relief, like someone had finally translated what you couldn't say, then share that message. Send it to someone you know is also waiting. Be a channel of comfort for another tired soul. Because sometimes the miracle starts with a simple, I understand you. And now, get ready, because what comes next is even more intimate. Let's talk about that feeling that no one is listening, not even God. But what if I told you that the answer has already been released, even if you don't see it yet? What you're about to discover will change the way you pray and the way you listen. If you've ever cried out with everything you had and yet it seemed like the sky remained silent, then this block is for you. Because there's something especially painful about feeling like your prayers hit the ceiling and bounce back. Something inside us begins to shut up, little by little, not by choice, but by exhaustion. The fear of not being heard is not just born from delay, it is born from doubt. Does God really listen to me? And if you listen, why don't you respond? This fear grows slowly, almost silently. First, you pray fervently, then with fewer words. And one day, you realize you don't even know where to start anymore. It's like being in a dark room, screaming for help and hearing only the echo of your own voice. But Jesus reveals to you that this apparent silence is an illusion, because there is a truth that few know, and it changes everything. God's answer doesn't begin when you see it. It starts when you pray. This truth is hidden in a powerful and often ignored story of the prophet Daniel, a man who, despite his love for God, had to face the pain of waiting and the fear of absence. Daniel fasted, prayed, and sought understanding for 21 days. 3 whole weeks of pleading, without any sign, without response, without a visible movement. Can you imagine this? 3 weeks wondering, has God abandoned me? But then, on the 21st day, the sky tears apart. An angel appears before Daniel and reveals a truth that still carries healing power for many weary souls today. From the first day you set your heart to understand and humble yourself before your God, your words were heard. Daniel 10:12. From day 1, not in the second, not in the 21st, but from the first. The response had already been sent. There was an invisible war going on, a spiritual battle in the celestial realm. And this completely changes our perception of prayer, because it shows us that there is more going on than meets the eye. This story debunks the lie that silence is synonymous with absence, and he brings to light a revelation that can restore your faith now. Jesus reveals to you that God does not ignore any prayer made with a broken heart. None. He hears every sigh, every tear, every word that you couldn't even form, but that burst from your spirit like a silent cry. Maybe you've been praying for something for months, years. Maybe it's for the salvation of someone you love, for a cure, for a fresh start, or even for the strength to continue. And you feel invisible. But if Daniel had not persevered until the 21st, he would never have known the truth that God had already sent help from the beginning. What does this reveal about your life? It's not because you haven't seen that God isn't acting. Just because you didn't hear a yes doesn't mean he's saying no. There is a difference between absence and an invisible battle. Sometimes God is fighting for you in places you can't imagine. and your part is to continue. Keep praying, keep believing, keep hoping, not because you see, but because you believe. And here's a reality check that can free your soul. The greatest miracle of prayer isn't when God answers. It's when you still don't respond, when you choose faith over discouragement, when He declares in the midst of pain, "I still trust." Maybe today you are on day 1 or day 10 or even day 20, but don't stop. Don't silence your soul, because the answer you seek has already been activated the very moment you began to pray. If this message spoke straight to your heart, declare in the comments, "God heard me from day 1." Write with faith, even if your eyes still don't. See, may your soul cling to the certainty that the sky is in movement, that there are angels fighting for you, that the Father is attentive to every detail, because this isn't just ancient history, it's a living promise. And if you know someone who feels this way, forgotten, ignored, without the strength to continue praying, send this word. Be the confirmation that this person's heart is silently begging. And now, close your eyes for a second. Take a deep breath and imagine, if God has already heard, what stops you from trusting? Because what comes next will take you into an even deeper area. Let's dive into the field of thoughts, into what imprisons the mind and steals peace. And what you will discover now will change the way you see every battle you fight inside. Take a deep breath, because what comes now will touch exactly where it hurts most, in the thoughts that you try to silence, in the internal confusion that no one sees, in that silent battle that happens inside you every day. The fear that controls the mind does not appear all at once. It infiltrates. He whispers. He simulates truths with the voice of lies. He says, "You won't make it. You're not enough. You'll never be free." And you start to believe. Because when fear settles in the mind, it not only arrests, it convinces. But Jesus reveals to you that there is a way to escape this mental imprisonment. And that path begins with the truth. Not your truth, not the truth of what you feel, but the truth of the Word. Because fear can dominate the mind, but it cannot resist the transformation that the Holy Spirit brings about when you surrender to renewal through faith. The Apostle Paul knew this, and that is why he wrote one of the most radical and most liberating instructions on the human mind. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. Paul is not just giving spiritual advice. He is pointing out a path to the liberation of the soul. Because if the mind is not renewed, fear will continue to shape your reality. Now stop and think with me. How many times what paralyzes you is not what is really happening, but what you imagine will happen. What stops you is not the problem. It's the thought. Anxiety, panic, insomnia, exhaustion, it all comes from a mind that can't find rest. And that's exactly where the enemy acts. He doesn't need to arrest your body if he already controls your thoughts. And here comes the twist. If fear entered the mind, healing also begins there, but not with motivational phrases, nor with superficial positivity. The kind of renewal Paul is talking about requires confrontation, requires delivery. It requires letting go of old patterns, even the thoughts you've carried since childhood. Maybe you grew up being told you weren't smart enough, or that I needed to please everyone to be accepted. Maybe someone told you that you would never succeed, or that you would be like your parents' mistakes. And without realizing it, these words became strongholds within you. But the Holy Spirit has the power to tear down these strongholds. And Jesus reveals to you that when you align yourself with God's truth, your mind begins to be redesigned. Think of it as spiritual reprogramming. You no longer need to live reacting with fear, because now you respond with faith. You are no longer hostage to the voices of guilt, because now you hear the voice of grace. And this is not theory. This is transformation, real, deep, and accessible to everyone who believes. But here's the detail. This renewal is not instantaneous. It is daily. It's up to you to choose, with every negative thought, to remember what God says about you. It's capturing thoughts of defeat and declaring promises of victory. It's about stopping living based on what if it goes wrong and begin to declare, what if God does something beyond what I expect? But pay attention, because this will require a decision. Either you feed your fears with your attention, or you feed your faith with the word. You can't do both. A mind full of truth has no room for lies. Now answer honestly. What have you been feeding inside your mind? Anxiety or hope? Old guilt or identity in Christ? Are you what fear says or what heaven declares? If these questions move you, it is because the Holy Spirit is calling you today to an internal reconfiguration. He wants to show you that the peace of God is not the absence of problems. It is dominion over the internal storm. And it's no coincidence that you're here now, listening to this. There is something in you that needs to be released. And this liberation begins with a simple but powerful choice. Believing that your mind can be transformed, that you can think differently, feel different, live differently. Not by our own effort, but by the action of the Spirit. If this word touched deep areas of your mind, comment now. Jesus renews my mind. Write sincerely. Sometimes declaring this is the first step to overcoming the lies you have been believing for years. And if this content is bringing clarity where there was confusion before, don't keep it to yourself. Share. Send it to someone you know is struggling with heavy, dark thoughts, because your simple act of sending this video could be the trigger for liberation. And now, what comes next goes straight to the point where faith seems weak and spirituality mixes with frustration. The next block will reveal what happens when you feel like you will never be good enough for God, and how Jesus responds to that with a love that dispels all doubt. What is to come will confront you and comfort you at the same time. The mind can be at peace, and yet the heart trembles before a question that never stops. What if I'm not good enough for God? This is a subtle but cruel fear. He doesn't scream, he whispers, and what he whispers eats away. You don't pray enough. You don't fast like you should. You still make mistakes. You don't deserve to be close to him. This is the fear of spiritual failure, the fear of falling short even in the face of God's love. And perhaps, right now, you are asking yourself, does he really accept me even when I have doubts, even when I fall, even when I no longer understand anything? If this question accompanies you, then Jesus reveals an answer to you through a man who also doubted, who also hesitated, who was also afraid to believe but was still welcomed by Christ, Thomas. After the resurrection, the disciples were ecstatic. Jesus had returned. He was alive. They had seen it. They had played. They believed. But Thomas was not there when Jesus first appeared. And when he heard the testimony of his friends, he said something that carries the echo of so many hearts wounded by faith. If I don't see it, if I don't touch it, I won't believe. And here is the most shocking moment. Jesus could have ignored Thomas. He could have accused him of being weak. I could have exposed him in front of everyone. But he didn't do any of that. Jesus came back just for him. And with disarming love, he approaches and says, "Here, Thomas, see my hands. Don't be unbelievers, but believers." John 20:27. Now imagine this. The creator of the universe moving through someone who was sunk in doubt. This is the God you serve, a God who does not demand perfection before meeting you, but who enters your room of fear and says, "I came for you." Thomas's doubt was not ignored. It was welcomed. And here is the spiritual secret that many do not realize. Jesus does not condemn the heart that doubts. He reveals himself to him. The fear of spiritual failure only has strength when you believe that you need to deserve God's love. But his love was never based on your performance. It was based on his grace. But there is more. After Thomas touches him, Jesus declares, "Blessed are they who have not seen and yet have believed." John 20:29. He was talking about you. From all of us who, at some point, believed without even seeing it, who continued praying even when they didn't feel like it, who chose to get up even after failing, and that in the eyes of heaven is genuine faith. Because faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is deciding to believe even when doubt tries to scream. Faith is not feeling spiritual every day. It's about continuing to search even on days when your soul seems empty. Faith is continuing to trust, even when you're not sure how. And here's the liberating truth that needs to hit you right now. You don't have to be perfect to be loved by God. The fear of spiritual failure is unmasked when we understand that Jesus already knew all of our failures, and yet he chose to die for us. He didn't wait for you to be good enough to lay down his life. He went to the cross when you were still fragile, flawed, imperfect. Jesus reveals to you that what you call failure, he calls a journey. And what fear uses to push you away, it uses to bring you closer. Because every discouragement is an opportunity for grace. Every weakness, a chance for his strength to manifest. If today you feel that you have failed spiritually, that you have disappointed God, that you have fallen short, listen to this carefully. He still chooses you. He still approaches. He still holds out his hands. Because God's love is not a reward for good behavior. It's an undeserved gift, and that's precisely what makes it so powerful. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine Jesus coming into your life right now, looking you in the eyes and saying, "You are not a failure. You are mine." Feel this spiritual embrace, because the faith that you think is small is big enough to move his heart. Now, with everything you are feeling, I want to invite you to publicly declare in the comments if this word touched you. Even without seeing it, I believe. Right. Pour out your heart. This comment isn't just for you. It's a bridge for someone who is on the verge of giving up on faith. And if this message spoke directly to you, if it found your heart tired of trying to be good enough, then leave a like on this video. Because every like here turns into a light for someone who desperately needs to hear that they are still loved by God, even in the midst of struggle. And it doesn't stop here. The next story will delve into even more delicate territory. The moment when even Jesus felt his soul in agony. The point where emotional control seems to slip through your hands. And the only way out is to surrender. What you are about to discover will change the way you understand your own emotional pain. Get ready. Gethsemane is closer than you think. And here comes the deepest part. Perhaps the most human, most intimate, and, at the same time, most divine of this entire journey. The fear of losing emotional control. That moment when the soul is so overwhelmed, so pressured, that all we can say is, "Father, I can't take it anymore." If you've ever faced anxiety attacks, panic attacks, sleepless nights with a racing heart, disordered thoughts and tears that don't stop, this block is for you. Because there is a place in the Bible where even Jesus felt this. And what happens in that place can change everything you understand about emotional suffering, mental fragility, and spiritual surrender. Yes, Jesus reveals to you a truth that was lived on the most sacred ground of despair, Gethsemane. It was night. The sky was dark, but even darker was the storm within him. Jesus knew what was coming. The physical pain, yes, but also the weight of the world's sin, the separation from the Father, the crushing anguish of carrying that which was not his. And it was there, in that garden, that he poured himself out in such a vulnerable way that many avoid looking straight ahead. The text says that his soul was anguished to the point of death. Strong words that resonate with anyone who has felt despair on the inside without knowing how to explain it on the outside. He moved away from the disciples a little. He fell face down on the ground, and then he prayed, "Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but thine, be done." Luke 22:42, read it again. Slower. "Take this cup away from me." That's Jesus saying, "Father, this is too heavy. I'm feeling everything, and it's crushing me." It's Jesus in an emotional panic. It is the Savior of the world begging for relief. But it is also Jesus delivering his will nonetheless. This is divine. This is powerful. This is real. And now take a deep breath, because there is something even more impactful in this text. In the next verse, it is written, "Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him." Luke 22:43. It wasn't relief, it was strength. Jesus was not spared from the cup, but was strengthened to face it. And that's exactly what he wants to do for you. You may be going through a moment where you feel like you are going to fall apart at any moment, who lost emotional control, that no one understands what's going on inside you. But Jesus understands, because he has already been there. Gethsemane is eternal proof that God is not distant from your emotional pain. He's already passed her, already cried like you cry. I've already sweat blood because of anguish. And when you think you are alone in your pain, Jesus reveals to you, I was in that place, and I am with you now. This crisis you face, this feeling of emotional out of control, is not a sign of spiritual weakness. It is part of humanity that God chose to experience, and it is in this humanity that he finds you. Because what matters is not what you feel, but who you give those feelings to. The world can teach you to suppress, controlling, to be avoided, but Jesus teaches you to pour, to surrender, to trust, because relief may not come immediately, but the strength will come, always. Now imagine Jesus in the garden. Imagine him fallen, alone, sweating blood, breathing hard, and yet saying, Thy will be done. He knew the pain would be real, but he also knew that the glory would be greater. And maybe this is what you need to remember today. Suffering is not the end. It's the portal. It is the field where God's strength will flourish within you. And if Gethsemane was necessary for Jesus to fulfill his purpose, perhaps your moment of emotional pain is also shaping you for something greater than you can see now. If you're reading this and feeling like you've reached your emotional limit, you need to know that you're not alone. God did not abandon you in the middle of the garden. He sent angels to strengthen Jesus, and he has already released help upon you. Declare in the comments with all your heart, Lord, even in fear, I trust in you. Write, confess, release what's inside. Your comment could be the seed of restoration in the life of someone who is exactly where you are, feeling about to fall. But falling into the arms of God is the beginning of healing. And if this message touched you deeply, share it. Send it to someone you know is struggling emotionally. You can be the answer to someone's prayer right now. Now take a deep breath, close your eyes, and imagine Jesus saying to you in a firm but tender voice, You are not alone. I am with you. Let's get through this together. This is the revelation that changes everything. If you've made it this far, take a deep breath. Because what is happening inside you right now is not chance. It is a move of God. Everything you heard, everything you felt, everything that was exposed within your heart throughout this journey is a seed of liberation. How many times have you tried to go it alone, keep your emotions under control, hide your anguish with a mechanical smile? How many nights have you spent awake, unable to explain to anyone what was going on in your soul? And today, here, you heard Jesus lovingly whisper, I know your pain. I've been there, and I'm here now. Jesus reveals to you that the fear that imprisons your soul may seem great, but it will never be greater than his presence within you. He does not promise you the absence of storms, but he offers you the peace that conquers them all. He does not require you to be strong all the time, but he invites you to surrender, because it is in your weakness that his power is made perfect. And if at any point, in the middle of this video, you found yourself in tears, with your chest tight, with that feeling of, this message was made for me, then understand, this wasn't just content. That was a date. This was spiritual. This was healing in motion. And even though everything still seems confusing, there is something you need to keep. You are not too broken to be restored. Jesus does not reject broken hearts. He rebuilds them more beautifully than before. He doesn't see you as a lost project, but as a masterpiece in transformation. And if you felt touched by this word, it's because God is already touching the roots of what holds you back, and he goes all the way with you. Now close your eyes for a moment. Don't resist. Just allow these words to sink in, because what comes next is more than a prayer. It's an answer. It is the time when you not only listen, but talk to God. That's when you deliver, and he welcomes. That's when you recognize, I can't do it alone, but with you, Lord, I can. Shall we pray together? Lord Jesus, in this sacred moment, we hand over to you the fears that suffocate us, the pains that no one sees, the anguish that takes over our minds, and the weight that we can no longer carry alone. Father, we cry out, enter the areas where chaos reigns, invade, transform, heal. It frees us from anxiety, guilt, lack of emotional control, loneliness, discouragement. Rewrite our history, Lord. Exchange the weight for the lightness of your presence. Take the place of fear with your perfect peace. May every tear shed here be collected by your love. May every wounded heart now receive the touch of your hand. We surrender to you, Jesus. Make an address. Make it new. Make it complete. In your name, we seal this prayer and declare, we are free not by our own strength, but by your sacrifice. Amen. If you made it to the end, that's no small feat. It's a clear sign God is working deeply in you. And now, you can't stop here. Because the video that is on the screen is the direct continuation of this movement that began in your heart. It's not just another piece of content, it's the next spiritual key that can unlock what's still locked inside you. What you will discover now may be exactly what was needed for your complete liberation. Don't leave without watching. Serious. You need to see this. If this message spoke to you in a profound way, comment below. I made it to the end. This is more than a comment. It's a testimony, and it could be exactly the encouragement someone needs to not give up. Share this word with someone you know needs to hear it. Remember, what touched you could be the answer to someone else's prayer. Be God's channel, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do so now. If this message has edified you, this is your way of saying, God, keep talking to me. Your registration is more than a click. It's an act of faith, a commitment to your spiritual journey. And by signing up, you join a community of people who, like you, are seeking healing, purpose, and transformation through Jesus. And to close this moment with the authority of the Word, receive this truth. With all your heart, call to me, and I will answer you. And I will tell you great and sure things that you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. Now go. Click on the video that is appearing. Jesus still has more to reveal to you, and what comes now could change everything.